The laughter cut through the dojo like a knife, sharp and echoing off the pristine white walls. Danielle Washington hadn't even touched the mat yet, and already the room of mostly younger, well-groomed athletes was snickering. The fluorescent lights bounced off the polished wooden floor, highlighting every face turned in her direction. Her weathered gym bag sat heavily by her side, a stark contrast to the designer equipment lining the walls. "Hey, sweetheart," called the instructor, his voice dripping with condescension. "Did you take a wrong turn on your way to the yoga studio?" His smirk spread across his face like spilled oil. Danielle's heart pounded in her chest, but her expression remained impassive. She stood at the edge of the mat in Chicago's Gold Coast neighborhood, her GI slightly faded, her belt tied with quiet precision. The pristine academy, with its floor-to-ceiling mirrors, reflected her solitary figure, a 45-year-old black woman among a sea of younger, predominantly white faces. She didn't respond to the taunt. She'd learned long ago that sometimes silence speaks louder than indignation. "Come on," another voice chimed in from the back. "You're gonna break a nail." More laughter rippled through the room like a contagion. What they saw was a woman in her mid-40s, soft-spoken, and not dressed in the flashy gear that the others flaunted. What they didn't see were the calluses on her hands, the resilience in her spine, forged through years of service, or the discipline she'd cultivated from pain. And what none of them knew was that they had just mocked the wrong woman. The Chicago Elite Jiu-Jitsu Academy was a sleek establishment in the wealthy district, mirrors, air conditioning, and a monthly fee that could cover groceries for an entire family. It was owned by millionaire martial artist Brad the Hammer Clayton, a former MMA fighter who still carried himself like he was in the octagon. His championship belts hung prominently on the wall, catching the light with every movement. To him, the gym wasn't a place for learning, it was a kingdom, and he was the king. Danielle joined because she needed a focus. After losing her job at the VA hospital due to budget cuts and finalizing a painful divorce that left her financially drained, she was searching for something, anything, to ground her. Therapy hadn't helped. Friends had faded away one by one, but discipline, structure, that was her language. She had once served in the army, 15 years, combatives instructor, medically discharged after a spinal injury from a convoy accident in Kandahar that left her with chronic pain and a slight limp only noticeable to the most observant eye. She never shared that history at the academy. Why would she? Nobody asked, nobody cared. They were too busy admiring Brad's trophies and their own reflections. Brad saw her as an easy target from day one. Old school, he called her. Civilian, soft. In reality, he was threatened by the way she picked up techniques effortlessly, by her quiet strength that commanded respect without demanding it. He began singling her out during class, using her as an example for what not to do. Pushed her harder than necessary, swept her legs without warning, made her do push-ups until her injured back screamed with pain that she refused to voice. And she took it all without flinching. She had taken worse in places far more dangerous than this polished sanctuary for the privileged. She started cleaning the mats at the end of class, not because she was told to, but because that's what she did, left things better than she found them. That's when Brad tossed her a towel one night and said loud enough for others to hear, "You missed a spot, soldier." The smirk on his face, the smirks on theirs. The towel landed at her feet like a challenge. At home, Danielle had nothing but a one-bedroom apartment in Southside Chicago with a borrowed mattress, a box of army memorabilia, and a single photo of her son, her baby, who she lost to leukemia 6 years ago. His dog tags hung next to hers on a simple chain. She wore them under her GI, close to her heart, the metal cool against her skin, a reminder of what real pain felt like. The humiliation didn't stop at the academy's double-glass doors. Whispers followed her to the grocery store from younger students who had seen viral clips of her being mocked during class. Online forums laughed at the wannabe warrior who moved too slowly, who didn't belong. One even joked, maybe she should teach knitting instead of jiu-jitsu. The comments stung more than she wanted to admit, making her question if she'd made the right choice in returning to martial arts. But what they didn't know was that Danielle was training, just not exclusively at Brad's academy. Twice a week, In the back of a community center in a forgotten neighborhood on the west side, she met with Master Sergeant Ray Owens, a retired Marine with salt and pepper hair who had once taught close combat overseas. He knew her story. He'd served with her brother before he was killed in action. "They don't see you," he told her one evening, watching her choke back frustration as she nursed her sore back. "But they will. When the moment comes, they will." Judith, a fellow veteran who worked at the community center, became a quiet ally. A woman in her 60s with knowing eyes, she'd slipped Danielle herbal compresses for her back without a word. They understood each other, women who had served a country that often forgot them once the uniform came off. "I don't know why I keep going back there," Danielle confessed one day, rolling her shoulders to ease the tension. "It's like I'm punishing myself." "Maybe," Judith replied, her weathered hands straightening pamphlets on a nearby desk. "Or maybe you're just waiting for the right moment." The right moment. Danielle turned those words over in her mind as she continued her training with Owens, his methods old school but effective. While Brad's students practiced flashy moves for competitions, Danielle drilled fundamentals until they became second nature. "Foundations before flourish," Owens would say, his voice steady as he corrected her form with the gentleness of someone handling something precious. Brad's treatment worsened as he noticed Danielle's subtle improvement. He'd partner her with aggressive newcomers, claiming it was to toughen her up. During one particularly brutal session, a young man named Tyler cranked a submission hold too far, nearly dislocating her shoulder. Brad had simply shrugged. "Tap faster next time," he said coldly, turning away as Danielle bit back tears of pain and rage. That night, as she iced her shoulder alone in her apartment, the radiator clanking in protest against the Chicago winter outside, Danielle almost quit. Her GI hung limply from a hook on the door, a ghost of possibilities. She fingered her son's dog tags, remembered how he'd fought until his last breath. "I don't know if I can do this anymore, Marcus," she whispered to the empty room. The silence that answered felt like permission to surrender. But then her phone buzzed. A message from Owens. "City Open Tournament. 2 months from now, all levels." "Are you ready?" Danielle stared at the message, her thumb hovering over the screen. Was she ready? The question echoed in her mind as she glanced at her son's photo. His wide smile, his determined eyes. The same eyes that looked back at her in the mirror. She typed her response. "Ready." The moment came at Chicago's biggest tournament of the year, held in the gleaming convention center downtown. The air thrummed with anticipation, the smell of sweat and determination hanging heavily over the crowd. Danielle had quietly registered under a clause that allowed alternative certification from high-ranking instructors. Owens signed off, his signature a testament to his belief in her abilities. No one from the academy even noticed. Until the announcements began. One competitor dropped out of the black belt division due to injury. The spot went to an alternate. And that alternate was Danielle Washington. Brad was livid when he heard the announcement echo through the speakers. "She's a white belt," he yelled at the officials, his face reddening with each word. "This is a joke." But Owens was already there, calm and unshaken in his worn Marine Corps sweatshirt. "She earned it," he said simply. "She qualifies." He produced the documentation, Danielle's military records, her certifications as a combatives instructor, her honorable discharge, all legitimate, all overlooked by a man who never bothered to ask. To make matters worse for Brad, he was slated to face her in the first round. The universe had a sense of irony after all. In the preparation area, surrounded by competitors stretching and mentally preparing, Danielle felt strangely calm. Judith had come to support her, sitting quietly in the bleachers. Even Tyler was there, though he stood awkwardly apart from Brad's entourage, his eyes revealing a newfound respect after learning about her military background from the tournament roster. "You don't have to prove anything to these people," Owens told her as he helped her warm up, his voice low and steady. "I know," Danielle replied, adjusting her son's dog tags under her GI. "I'm proving it to myself." When Danielle stepped onto the mat, there was no fanfare. Just silence descending over the crowd as they registered the unlikely competitor. Her face remained calm, her movements smooth as water as she took her position. She bowed respectfully, meeting Brad's gaze without flinching. Brad smirked, whispered, just loudly enough for her to hear, "Ready to get embarrassed?" But it was him who didn't see it coming. The whistle blew, sharp and definitive. Danielle shifted left, with a grace that belied her years of pain, baited right with a subtle movement that drew Brad's attention, then dropped low and swept his base leg in a flawless motion that caught him off balance. Before he could recover, she transitioned into a tight triangle choke, textbook perfect, and Brad tapped frantically against her leg, his face contorting in shock and disbelief. 11 seconds. That's all it took. The crowd was stunned to silence before erupting into chaotic noise. Phones had recorded everything. The man who had belittled her for months was just submitted by the woman he'd laughed at, the woman he'd dismissed, the woman whose strength he had failed to recognize. Whispers turned to roars, people clapped, some stood in spontaneous recognition of what they'd just witnessed. Brad stumbled up, red-faced and furious, refusing the customary handshake. Danielle stood tall, her back straight despite the years of pain, bowed to the referee and walked off the mat. Owens was waiting with a proud nod that said more than words ever could. "That's my sister in arms," Judith murmured from the stands, her eyes glistening with unshed tears. Have you ever witnessed someone being underestimated, only to prove everyone wrong in a moment of unexpected triumph? Share your story in the comments below. In the days that followed, the video spread, online like wildfire. But this time Danielle wasn't mocked, she was celebrated, a symbol of quiet strength against arrogance. News outlets called it the 11-second justice. Veterans commented with pride. Women called her an inspiration. Even some from the academy reached out with apologies, their eyes finally opened to the toxic culture they'd enabled. Brad? He tried to discredit her, claimed the move was luck, insisted she didn't belong, but investigations soon revealed a pattern: bullying, misogyny, intimidation. Former students came forward with stories similar to Danielle's. The Regional Martial Arts Association launched an inquiry. He was stripped of his teaching license. Sponsors pulled out faster than he could counter. Memberships plummeted as people voted with their feet and their wallets. Danielle declined the Academy's new owner's offer to return as an instructor. Instead, she opened her own space, a humble room in the community center where she now teaches women, especially veterans, how to defend themselves and rebuild their confidence. Her first student was Judith, who claimed she was too old to learn, but showed up anyway, determined to support Danielle's vision. "We learn together," Danielle told her, helping the older woman through a basic stance. That's how it works. Her program, Resilient Ground, grew faster than she imagined. Survivors of abuse, former soldiers, single mothers, all came with their stories and their determination. "You understand us," they said, eyes bright with recognition. "You teach more than technique. You teach strength." The waiting list grew, longer each week, forcing Danielle to add more classes, to hire assistants, other veterans who needed purpose as much as she had. Every time she taught, she wore her son's dog tags. They jingled softly as she moved across the mat, a quiet anthem to everything she'd endured and everything she had become. Sometimes, in quiet moments, she imagined Marcus watching her, his smile radiant with pride. Tyler eventually joined her program as a volunteer instructor, bringing with him other former students from Brad's academy who were seeking redemption and a more respectful approach to martial arts. "You showed us what real strength looks like," he told her one day after class, his former arrogance replaced by genuine humility. One year after the tournament, Danielle received an invitation to speak at a national conference on women in martial arts. Standing at the podium, looking out at hundreds of faces, some skeptical, some inspired, she thought about how far she'd come from that first day on the mat when laughter had cut through her confidence. "Power isn't about domination," she told the hushed audience. "It's about resilience. It's about getting up one more time than you fall. It's about recognizing your worth when others don't." Her words resonated through the hall, reaching beyond the walls to touch those who needed to hear them most. She never chased revenge. She chose purpose. And in doing so, she showed the world something too many had forgotten. That true power isn't loud. It doesn't brag. It waits until the right moment to rise. You are amazing. If you genuinely enjoyed this story, please leave a like and subscribe. It's a great feedback for me. If it made you feel seen, heard, or simply reminded, that change is still possible. Share it with someone who needs a little hope today. See you.